if there was a geographic name, we would be the Texas Houston North Mission. So we end about 4 miles north of downtown Houston. So we get the projects. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. And then we go about 2 hours north to a place called Crockett, where there's a branch of like 30 members. And then we go, it's mostly north and west. So we have a place called Katy, which is full of really, really, really wealthy people that do oil and gas. And then there's Sealy, which is another branch in the middle of nowhere. And then we also have the university. We have Texas A&M up there, and it's in a city called College Station. And College Station is like the celestial area of the mission, and everybody wants to go to College Station. And I really wanted to go to college, and I didn't make it, which was kind of sad in my life. But so we have the temple. My first person president had us go, we went as a district every 6 weeks. The mission president that's there now has said that we can go. I can't remember if you can only go once to transfer, but I don't think that there's that restriction. But they ask that you take people with you. So like less actives and working to get with them to the temple or recent converts, but making it more of a missionary opportunity to go to the temple instead of just me going to the temple. And most of the members that live in Houston are what we call transplants. So most of them are from other places. A lot of them are not Houston Texans. I was expecting to go down there and everybody was going to speak in Southern accents and I was going to get grits and gravy and chicken. And I did not have that happen. There's a lot of members from Utah, but there's also a lot of members that are just from the Houston area. It's kind of a melting pot. And when I say kind of, I mean really a melting pot. There's Texans thrown in there. Once you get into the more rural areas is when you start, seeing the things, and people feed you squirrels. One of the elders said he ate a squirrel for dinner. Ew. But the people are very kind. Most of the mission and most of the areas are in a city called Spring, which is just north and is a suburb of Houston. And so like the Spring area, there's the Spring zone and the Houston North zone and the Klein zone, which is where the temple is. And that has most of the areas in the mission. So all of the rural areas, there's honestly probably less than a dozen, but there are so many in these wards because a lot of the time when people come to Houston, they draw a map around, or they draw a circle around the temple and say, I want a house in here, so that they can be close to the temple. And the members are really kind. I really love them. They're very strong. They take care of the missionaries. There's always people that don't feed you, and there's always people that don't like you, but you'll find that anywhere. They are just very solid. I loved working with the youth. The youth are fabulous. The high schools are very kind of scary. There's a lot of stuff that goes on there. There's a lot of, they have a lot of pornography issues. They have a lot of sexual issues, and these kids are just rock solid, and they have to be, and they are, and they're so cool. And the mission has English and Spanish. So it's kind of two separate missions, kind of. Not really, because there are times when you'll have, like I said, a Spanish district in your zone, but a lot of the times they have separate Spanish and English zones. So the only time you really see the Spanish missionaries is if you're giving them referrals, or if they magically happen to be in your zone, or zone conferences or things. I served in 5 areas. Another story. So growing up, my best friend lived down the street from me. Her name was Liz. She was an only child, and her dad worked at the University of Utah. And so growing up, we would always hang out together. And then when I was about 14, I believe, her dad got transferred to Texas A&M. So I got my call, and I saw that College Station was in my mission. And I had visited her one time. I had spent a week down there. And so I was convinced that I was getting sent down there to teach them. And one of the most humbling things was I never went up there. I was sure that that's why the Lord wanted me there. But I realized that he had so many much bigger things that he wanted to teach me than what I thought he was going to teach me. So I served in 5 different areas. I started off in a place called Oak Ridge, which is right across the street right across the freeway, literally, from a place called the Woodlands, which is basically the wealthiest, most beautiful, planned community of a city where all of the oil and gas people live. So that was really interesting because we would have them on one side of the freeway, and then literally across the tracks on the other side of the freeway was this super ghetto place where, I mean, everybody was living in shacks and RVs, and there were drug issues, and the bishop wouldn't let us go there after it got dark. So that was really interesting. I then got transferred to a place called Westfield, which was it was closer to the mission office, but it was in more of a sketchy area. And I was in a trio there. I was only there for 6 weeks. And then I went to a place called the Windrose Ward, not Klein yet. I went to the Windrose Ward, and that was a really hard ward. I was there for about a transfer and a half, and then another ward got split in the zone, and they took the elders out of that ward and put them in our ward and put us in this new ward. And so my companion and I opened this new area for sisters. I was there for 6 months, and it was great, and we taught family, and it was awesome. And then I got transferred to a place called Old Oaks, which is down almost to the ghetto, but not quite. There are a couple of areas that are in the 3rd ward and the 5th ward are about as bad as it gets in the US. But we were just on the border of that. So we had a little bit of that, but it was, you know, if you would ask the people down in those wards, they'd be like, that's nothing, because they have all the stuff farther south. So yeah, that's where I served. Bluebell ice cream is manna from heaven, and it is delicious. And the Bluebell factory is in our mission, so you can go there on P-Day if you get someone to drive you there. It's just this ice cream, and I don't know why it's so good, but it is. It's just really, really good. There are no sidewalks anywhere, and there are no shoulders on the roads. And I don't care what you say, Houston drivers are the worst in the entire world. They just kind of drive like they're off in their own little world, and they just move over, and they speed up, and they slow down, and I don't understand them at all. So we have one of the largest car fleets in the world. So there are very few biking areas, because a lot of the areas are bigger, I think, and because it's super sketchy, because there are no shoulders to bike, which I did for 6 weeks or 6 months, and it was a struggle. It was really hard, but I did love biking. I had like a Saul Paul conversion experience to biking as a missionary, because I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world, because I was in a skirt, I was all sweaty and gross and nasty. But once I actually was on a bike, I was sweaty and gross and nasty. But if you bike all day long and you don't meet a single person, you still feel really accomplished, because you biked like 12 miles and it was 1.5 million degrees. It's easier to talk to people. I mean, we stopped and talked to people on our bikes all the time. And I had like this I felt more connected to the world because I wasn't in a box all the time. So I actually loved biking, but there's so many cars, which is really nice and is a blessing, except for miles, because you only get to drive a certain amount of miles, and that's kind of the worst thing in the world. You might gain weight if you're not careful, because it's the South and the food is really good. Barbecue is great. My favorite, I mean, they have a place called Rudy's, which everybody usually loves, unless you're like a hipster, and then you don't like Rudy's because it's too mainstream. But my favorite were these little hole-in-the-wall barbecue restaurants. They were great. There's one by the Spring Steak Center on Hannah Road, where it's literally a little shack in front of these people's houses, and it's called Country Town Barbecue, and it is so good. But you go in there and there's plastic tables, and it smells really weird, but it is so, so good. So you'll get barbecue. I mean, I was kind of expecting to get all kinds of Southern food. I didn't. I think it was mostly because I was in the city. But the farther out you go, the more excellent food you get. I know that the Spanish missionaries got good food, and they also got really weird food. I ate menudo once, which is cow intestine soup. It wasn't very good. I mean, it just was weird. I mean, it tasted all right, I think, but it was just really weird. And everybody will give you water all the time. That is one of the ways to get in someone's house. If they're like, no, I don't want to talk to you, well, do you have some water? And honestly, people will, especially if you're out during the summer, people will stop you or people will offer you water. Even if they don't let you in, they will say, here, do you want some water? And people are usually really nice about when you're talking to them too. I got really frustrated with some people, that because they're very strong in their own faith. So some people would be very kind. Some people would say, you know, I really appreciate what you're doing, because they do a lot of the same thing. There's these, mega churches. They have giant churches everywhere. In each of my areas, I have at least one mega church. And they hold, you know, it's like not stadium size, but they're giant auditoriums. And so we would go, you know, a lot of the people we would talk to would go to these churches, but they were just huge. And everybody has their own little church that they go to, but people are usually very kind. When they're not kind, they're not. But I found that people were willing to talk to us. Also, I'm a girl, so that probably was a lot easier. I think I heard that the elders got stuff thrown at them and got cussed out, but they were always really nice to us. So it was great.